All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Mark Herschberg. Mark, welcome. So awesome to have you today.
Thank you for having me. It is my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, same. And I want to give a quick shout out to the podcast guest platform because I love the work that they're doing. They just are really brilliant at helping podcast hosts like myself find some amazing guests. That's how you and I connected. In fact, if it weren't for them, you and I wouldn't even be having a conversation right now. And I know you and I already had a previous conversation, got to know each other, and I'm like, yep. I was like, Mark, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. And so I'm really excited to do this interview, have this conversation with you. And what I'd like to do is just kind of start off by turning it over to you so we can set a little bit of context and let the listeners know a little bit about who you are so we can talk about, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you do and the impact you make in this world. And also, even go into a little bit of backstory about how you got into this. And so, Mark, I'll just kind of turn it over to you and let you share what you feel is most relevant.
Sure. We'll do the Mark Herschberg origin story.
There you go.
I grew up as a classic 80s nerd. Think any Hollywood stereotype, and I probably fit it. From Star Trek to chess camp to math team, I did it all. And of course, being an 80s nerd had certain advantages. It set me up for where I am today. It had disadvantages, including the challenges I had at school with a time when being a nerd was not quite so socially acceptable. And so that's how I grew up, and I was very STEM focused, as you can imagine, and very into math and science and tech.
Okay.
I went to MIT for college, which of course is Mecca. If you were an 80s nerd,
yep,
that's where you wanted to go. And I was lucky enough to get to go there and found my people. But when I came out of MIT, I stayed there. I have a couple undergraduate degrees. I've got a graduate degree. They're all STEM fields. And when I came out of that, I said, okay, what do I want to do? I didn't quite know. I knew I didn't want to go into finance. I knew I didn't want to do big tech. And big tech in the 90s, by the way, that was Microsoft and IBM, maybe AT&T. So that wasn't right. I didn't want to do consulting. None of this looks right to me. And I fell into something called a startup. Now, back in the 90s, startups weren't as well known as they are now. And my parents kind of looked at me and said, what's this? This is some tiny company? I said, no, this is, I think, what I want to do by process of elimination. It wasn't necessarily that I chose that. I just eliminated the other choices. But okay, I'll go with that. And I was very lucky to have a great first boss and a really good environment where I started to learn. And what I learned was that there was a whole bunch of stuff I had never learned. Because although I knew some of the fundamentals of coding, I was hired as a software developer, and this is the 90s, it was a good time for software developers. I knew how to write code. There were a bunch of other skills where I would just be putting my foot in my mouth and tripping up and just not understanding things like leadership, team building, communication. I was an engineer. Well, there's a right answer and a wrong answer. Well, yes, but how you explain that answer, and you might explain it differently to someone in marketing than someone on the tech team, and how to put it in business context. No one taught me this stuff. So I was tripping up a little. I recognized that to get where I wanted to go, which was to be a senior leader, which was to become a CTO, a chief technology officer, to get there, there were these skills that I needed to learn to fill in that gap. So I began to upskill myself. Now, back then, we didn't have great shows like this we could listen to. We didn't have a lot of online training. There weren't even that many coaches out there. It was mostly find a book and read it. And I began to upskill myself and then quickly realized these skills will help everyone on my team, not just me, not just senior leaders. So I began to upskill my team.
Okay.
And now I went on and I've had many years, more than I'd like to admit, career building tech companies as a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, CPO, Chief Product Officer. These days, I'm a fractional CTO, CPO. I consult to other companies who need tech leadership or tech guidance. But a funny thing happened along the way. As I was upskilling my team, MIT had gotten similar feedback. They were hearing from companies, we want to see these skills, leadership, networking, communication, negotiations. We want to see these skills in people we hire, not just people we hire from MIT, not just engineers or college grads. These are skills we want, and we can't find it.
Wow.
So MIT set out to instill this in our students. And as they began, I heard about this. I reached out, I said, listen, I've developed some training for my own people, and I'm happy to give it to you. Hopefully this can help you. Best of luck. That was the conversation I thought I would have.
Okay.
But instead, the person who was starting the program said, no, this is great, but can you help us do more? Sure. Okay. I figured I'll spend a couple hours over a few weeks, work on some additional content. Did that. They said, wow, this is great, but can you do still more? Because although we have wonderful professors at MIT, you're bringing a different perspective. You're bringing the perspective of being in the field. And I think we need that in this class. It can't just be academic. So we went out and found a bunch of people like me practicing engineering leaders. We wanted engineering leaders because MIT is a science and engineering school.
Yep.
And I have now been teaching for over 20 years at MIT in parallel to my work building tech startups. I've been doing this, and that, of course, led to my book, The Career Toolkit, the speaking I do. My app, Brain Bump, came out of that. So what I thought would just be a, here, take this, please, would be a single conversation, led to an entire second parallel career. And I've had a lot of that throughout my life.
Wow. Wow. That is a phenomenal story, Mark. That is a really awesome story. And how you just trying to be of service led to something far more than you had ever imagined, and also probably far more than they ever imagined too, and stuff, and so now this has been a 20-year relationship that has been going on here. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. That's pretty phenomenal. And
yeah, we're just over 20 at the time we're recording. And you're right, it was not expected or anticipated, but I've learned in life, when you see a door, open it.
Yeah.
Because you never know where it can lead.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And what a testament to what this podcast is all about, which is the power of relationships. And look at that one relationship that you have, and with MIT, and I don't know who the person or persons that you communicated with that started this whole thing, but that relationship or those relationships have ultimately led to the work that you guys have done together now. How many lives has that impacted over the last 20 years? I mean, that's staggering to think about. That's staggering to think about. And that's pretty awesome.
Tens of thousands have gone through our class, and I'm very proud of that. And that's just the MIT class. I've done similar programs elsewhere. And then, of course, again, the class helped inform my book. The book is not just for college students, it's a broader audience, but all that work. When it's funny, people ask me, how long did it take to write the book? I tell them only about 4.5 months. But the catch is I've been doing this for 20 years. That's where the real work happened. Yeah. And so the impact of that has been able to reach even more people, not just those at MIT. Yeah. And again, all because of this one conversation. That's right. That's right. Wow. Wow. Okay. So now that we've got some context set here and people have an idea of who Mark is and what Mark's all about, I'm gonna shift direction slightly. And I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, Mark, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Mark, I'm just really excited to hear your story, your experience around this topic of relationships. I'm going to pick two people. And of
Okay.
course, we're focused on people I got introduced to. My parents have had an amazing impact on my life, but that was kind of by default. They didn't pick me. I didn't pick them. We just got lucky, or at least I
That's right.
certainly did.
That's right.
There are two people who have a profound impact on my life. Many others have as well, but I'm going to single out two.
Okay.
And the first is my best friend, Melissa Schlager Newman.
Okay.
Now, I moved into a building in New York City. I moved here. I didn't know many people in New York. So I was meeting people, I had a few friends here, and I'm always friendly to the staff because these are people who I see every day. This is their job. You treat people well. You get to know them. I've now been in my building for many, many years. So I was always friendly with the staff, and our night shift doorman, he's the guy who's like your fun uncle. He had been in the building for years and he knew everyone. He's always fun to talk to. I'd come back at night and we'd chat before I headed up and went to bed. And after being here for probably about 2 years or so, maybe a year and a half, he said, there's someone I want you to meet. There's a woman in this apartment down the hall. She's going through a divorce right now. So now's not a good time, but I want you to meet her. I think you two would get along. It wasn't, I'm going to set you up on a date. It was just, you two should meet. Mm-hmm. And he does this. He's introduced people in the building, just, hey, you two might get along. Melissa became my best friend. She has been like a sister to me. We had the experience that you see on TV. When you think about TV shows set in New York, when you think about Seinfeld or Friends and the way people just show up in each other's apartments.
Yep.
That's what we would do. I could go into her apartment 11 at night as I was coming home and she's in pajamas. It didn't matter. She could do the same to my apartment. And it was like having a sister. We were very different people personality-wise. I am very left brain, STEM, logical. She was super spiritual. Okay. Very, the universe will tell me where to go, which would drive me nuts sometimes. I probably drove her nuts. But we made a good balance. And especially at times when I was facing stress, both having her in my life in general, as someone who was family to me and supportive, and someone who also, she was very into yoga and meditation and taught me how to deal with stress better and had just a profound impact on my life. Now, unfortunately, Melissa passed away a few years ago, but she is still with me. She is just a tremendous influence in my life. Yeah. And I'm lucky that I can still carry her with me.
Wow. Very cool.
Now, the second person, Olivia Fox Caban. I met Olivia actually before I met Melissa. When I moved to New York, again, I didn't know many people, and I was trying to get to know folks. So this is a typical example of how life can work. In my office, and this job I had came from my girlfriend at the time who knew a guy who knew a guy who needed a tech leader. Okay, wound up in this job. And in fact, we can tell a story about that. At this job, I was talking to a coworker. She said, oh, I know a guy. He gets single people together to do stuff because he's trying to meet someone. Let me connect you to him, get it on his mailing list. And one of the things he would do is get people together for a First Fridays event, the type of things that you would get at a museum where they do the cocktails Friday night.
Okay.
Showed up Friday night. I was actually in a bad mood. It's one of those, I just had a bad day, but all right, I should force myself to go out. And I'm glad I did. And there's a whole long story here that we won't get into, but I met Olivia. And Olivia and I just kind of clicked when we met. Now, I didn't know it at the time. She had just moved to the US. She describes me as her first American friend. But Olivia and I clicked, and then we got together and had dinner shortly after that, again, strictly platonically, and became fast friends. We had similar mindsets and were very just supportive of each other. I do a lot of entertaining at home, and she and I I do a lot of social events. We did more business social events where we would do after work parties to get people together and expand our networks. And she has just been a great friend and supporter. And one of the things she did is she brought me into a community called Renaissance Weekend.
Okay.
This is, if you haven't heard of it, think TED Talk. So not Renaissance fairs with jousting. Those are fun too. But this is like a TED Talk kind of community. And she brought me into that, where I've met all sorts of other amazing people. If not for Olivia, who herself is an author, she has a wonderful book called The Charisma Myth. If not for Olivia and her path doing a book, and then bringing me into that community where I met more authors and people in the community, I never would have done a book. That wouldn't have led to the speaking, that wouldn't have led to the app, that wouldn't have brought me here to this conversation. Yeah. So these small little things, the sequence of event of my girlfriend introducing me to someone to hire me, to meet someone to Olivia, to this group, this chain is what brought me here and brought so much of where I am today. And so Olivia also has just had a tremendous impact, being, again, a supportive friend and someone who opened certain doors to put me down paths that really led to some exciting outcomes.
Wow. 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 That is really awesome. And you're right. When we start looking back at this stuff and these relationships in our lives and what the impact of those relationships have been over time, it's like, wow, it is really amazing what has transpired as a result of each of these relationships. And in this case, with Melissa and with Olivia and stuff. And it's incredibly powerful. And so I now want, so I just want to dig in a little bit deeper. And so if you look at these two relationships with Melissa and with Olivia, and I'm sure you can come up with lots of examples. I just want to challenge you to come up with one. Where has it been where you were empowered and you know that you got to make a really big, substantial impact, and hands down, that would have never happened if not for your relationship with Olivia or your relationship with Melissa? And I'm really, excited to just kind of hear an example of something like that.
Since doing the book, I have reached hundreds of thousands of people to give them advice. Wow. Now, I had been doing, I think, a decent job at MIT. And of course, there we've had tens of thousands of people go through the class.
Yep.
So I had some impact. But if I hadn't met Olivia, I would have just kept on teaching the class, and I still am, and just stayed in that, I'm going to describe it as a small pool.
Okay.
Certainly, it's a fun pool to be in teaching at MIT.
Yeah.
But it's a limited set of people who have access to that, who I can reach and help.
Sure.
And if I hadn't met Olivia and she hadn't introduced me to communities where there are other writers, where being an author is not impressive. Yes, it's impressive, but there's so many. In fact, the joke in this community is, oh, you're meeting another astronaut, because every other person there seems to be an astronaut. Or anywhere else in the world, you get impressed.
Yeah.
Not there.
Yeah.
So I met some people where it's, of course you can do a book. And this goes to our own perceptions, where we see something and think, oh, that's an aspirational goal, to it shifts to, well, no, this is just a very achievable goal, because I did, she did, he did, we can all do it. You can do it too.
Yeah.
And that led me again to the book, the app, the speaking, and all the podcasts I've been on because of it. I've just been able to reach so many people that I never would have even thought about trying to reach, let alone reaching, if I hadn't had that shift that came from Olivia and everything that stemmed from meeting her.
Yeah. Wow. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Wow. Well, this has been really awesome, Mark. And for anybody listening to this and going, man, Kevin, I really like Mark. I love the way he shows up. I love what he stands for. And we haven't even talked about the title of your book. So I want to make sure where can people find your book? And if there's any other resources you feel led to share, I want to make sure and let you do that as well. So we'll do that here.
Let's talk about the book and then all the free resources as well.
Okay.
The book is called The Career Toolkit: Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. And it covers skills we've been talking about. Networking is one of them. Leadership, negotiations, team building, management, having a career plan, which, by the way, even if you're an entrepreneur, you need a career plan. It's not that your title is going to change, but your own career will change. And certainly the people you hire, I feel we have an obligation as leaders and managers to help the careers of those under us. So the book, The Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You, you can find the website for that, and we'll talk about what else you can get there. The website is thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Okay.
And it will show you where you can buy it, Amazon and elsewhere. There's hardcover, there's ebook. You can get in touch with me. You can learn more about the book. But there's a whole bunch of free resources on there. Now, I am not a career coach. I do not want to sell you coaching or anything else. So I give away everything for free. I don't even ask you to give me your email to get this. So everything I'm about to tell you, it is free. On the website, I have additional articles I write every week. And so I go deeper into some of these topics beyond what's in the book.
Okay.
There's also a page of free resources. Now, the resources range from other books I recommend. I mentioned one before, Olivia's book, The Charisma Myth. Plenty of other books as well. But there's a bunch of free downloadable resources to help you in hiring, resources for people looking for jobs. How do they find a cultural fit? How do you even explore what is a cultural fit? There's also my favorite resource on the page is the Career Toolkit Development Program. These skills, obviously networking is one you value because you're listening to this show.
Yeah.
But imagine if everyone in your company was better at networking. What would that do to your bottom line? How many more sales and partnerships would you get? How much easier would it be to hire people because your network can attract and bring more people to you? But how do you upskill your team? And so in this free download, it's the first download on the resources page at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Okay.
You can download this and learn how to create a program within your organization to upskill everyone. It is completely free. You don't have to buy anything, don't have to do anything, and we'll tell you how to put together this program. Now, there is also an app, a free app, and you'll see it on this website, but it will take you to another website. It is the Brain Bump app, which is free on Apple and Android. The website for it, brainbumpapp.com.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing about the Brain Bump app. When I read a book like mine or listen to a show like this, I say, wow, there's some great tips in here. I hope I remember it. But honestly, 2 weeks after you finish the book, even a few days after you hear an episode, you're probably going to forget most of this. That's a problem. We want to retain it. And often, especially for networking tips, we want to use it in a different environment. So for example, that networking chapter in my book, where do you read it? Sitting at home. Where do you need it? Next month when you're at a conference.
Yeah.
So you've got to disconnect. How do we get you what you need, where you need it? And that's why I created the Brain Bump app. So the Brain Bump app, it takes tips from books, blogs, podcasts, talks, classes. It puts them into the app. Think like little flashcards, not Q&A. It's just here's what you should remember. They're all tagged by topic. And so you can use it one of two ways. I've got management and leadership tips in the book. So you might say, you know what, this is a good tip. I want to keep these top of mind. So every day at 9 a.m. as I go into the office, I want a little pop-up reminder. You don't even have to open the app. It's like a daily affirmation, but with the advice that you're trying to remember. You just see it, you go, right, good advice, swipe, done. It stays top of mind. Or you can use it just in time. So all the networking tips from my book, from my blog, and from other sources are all in the Brain Bump app. As you're walking into that conference center, literally you've parked your car, you've now entered the building, and you've got 200 feet till you're walking into maybe the convention floor. That's where you pull out the app, and in less than 10 seconds, you can pull up the networking tips, and they're right there. They're in your pocket with you, and you've got them right when and where you need them. Just look at, all right, yep, do that. Okay, here's a good way to do this. Okay, great, I've got ready to go. And so the Brain Bump app, which you can get at brainbumpapp.com, it is completely free. The app is free. The content on it is free. It will always be free. And we have an ever-growing set of content. So I mentioned there's stuff from my book and other books and podcasts, but we're constantly growing that set. So whatever you see today, there will be more next month. And now we're recording this in September 2023.
Yep.
but at some point a little later this fall, maybe by the time this comes out in the next few weeks, the 2.0 version of the app should be out. So not only will it have tips that we have put on the server free, you can also add your own tips. Maybe we haven't yet added a certain book or podcast or something you like. You'll be able to add your own content as well, always right there in your pocket.
Gotcha. Very good. Very good. Wow. Well, man, that is really incredibly generous, Mark. And heck, I want to thank you once again for taking the time to have this conversation, to share from your heart, to just because the goal of this podcast has always been really simple. I want to inspire our listeners to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own life. And thanks to you and your role that you played in this today, we definitely delivered on that. And so I want to thank you for that. Any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap, Mark?
I want to challenge them to go further. Yes, create meaningful relationships in your life. But if you are a leader, whether you own a company or you're an executive or a manager in the company and you have people reporting to you, I want you to help them create more meaningful relationships in their lives.
Yeah.
Networking is one of these topics where we've all heard about, we've all been told this is important, but no one actually sat us down and taught us how to do it.
That's
now,
right.
You've obviously taken the right step. You're listening to this show, you're taking that initiative, but there are other people, including people you might be responsible for, who could also benefit. So whether it's getting them to listen to this show as well, or creating the peer learning groups, which is what you can get in this free download from my website, or other means, please help empower others, not just yourself, to build these meaningful relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. And, I'll tell you, I have long believed that, as entrepreneurs, our most valuable asset is the relationships in our life. Everything else stems from that. And what you've shared today is more examples of that very thing right there. And so, Mark, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. Really appreciate you. And yeah, thanks so much, Mark.
Thanks for having me on the show.